Right, so so the intention here is I'm going to sort of zoom you around what I consider to be a good example of an assignment, remembering that the basis of these is the critical analysis. So that it's compare, contrast, all the time you're thinking compare, contrast. If you're writing academically, if you're writing stuff for journals or writing in a book, one of the things I suppose I got from mentors that I had was, if you're looking at a sentence or a paragraph, ask yourself the question, what's the value of this? If I've got this big rant that's gone on for a paragraph, has this actually added anything? Do the same thing with a table. Do the same thing with a figure. So an easy way of doing that is asking a so what question. So you've given me a picture of a triangle, time, cost, quality of it. So what? Okay, who cares? So how does that help in the critical analysis? The answer is it probably doesn't. Right? So I'll go through these and let's take questions as we go. Okay. So the basic sort of blocks to it then. I'll start off with the executive summary. So a sort of a bumper sticker I like to sort of think of the executive summary is it's really, I'll zoom in on these in a second so you can look at them. But that's about the length of it. It's a couple of pages long. Okay. If you were to turn over the back of a video at the video store, there'd be a synopsis about the movie. Hopefully it wouldn't tell you how it ends. However, it's pushing more and more like that. But this is also an executive summary. It is what this person is about to read is not an Agatha Christie novel. You don't have to get to the end of it to find out who's done it. Right? It's okay to tell people what you found and what your recommendations are right up front. Right? So that's what the executive summary does. So in the first piece here, so what we've got is we've got a bit of preamble about what the report is about, and then what the project is about. And then, okay, so what was done? There was an assessment done here and a practical project. This is the project that it was compared with the literature, and in doing that comparison, some key findings were found. And these are the findings. This is what we found. We went off and did an experiment. This is an experiment. It's taking a real project and comparing it with the literature and seeing what the difference is. After doing that, we find this. And then the next part is, alright, so that's what we found and this is what we plan to do. There's your recommendations. So there's the executive summary. It's nice, short, compact. You actually don't need to. Remember, this is written for somebody who has no intention, unless there's big problems here, to read the rest of it. Right? So it's a two-pager. That's all it is. It says what was done, how it was done, what was found, what do you recommend. Finished. And it is okay to declare everything here. I mean, your actual recommendations probably be a bit further and unpacked on this. But you can say what you recommended in the first couple of pages. Is that okay? Any questions on that executive summary? Okay. So the next thing to look at is table of contents. So there's a few things to get into the table of contents. So again, I'm just trying to give you the size of it, what it looks like. So we've got the actual list, the contents listing itself, and then we'll probably have a table which is the list of figures, and another one which is the list of tables. So something like Microsoft Project does this for you. Okay, it'll create these tables for you. If you want to know how to do them, YouTube. Right, go to YouTube and you'll find a million sort of talks on there how to put tables together, list of tables, and it's quite a simple function. Right. So if I was to zoom in then on the table of contents itself, so now we've got the executive summary. You notice that all the pieces are broken into parts. So we've got all the subsections in there. See, if you want to refer to anything with it back in the document, then you can refer back to the section. Equally, if in your recommendations you're going to mention in your recommendations as per this issue that was discovered, you've got a place to refer it back to. So it's presenting you with a map. One thing I would say that would be, I would like to see, which isn't on this one, I trawled through a few, but I couldn't find the exact ones. But one of the features I'd like to see on this one is the last one here. And on the last one, it sort of says what the conclusion of that section is. Ellie, you do that in your test.
Yeah.
You'll see what you're saying.
Oh, really?
So, so at the end of each section, because what you're saying is this, look, you've got a section on risk analysis, evaluation and treatment, okay? And then there's all the various parts to it. So this is where you looked at how risk analysis was done, and you stack that up against best practice, what it says in the journals. Same for the rest. And then when you get to the end, you've got to give the reader somewhere to go. So me as a reader, I would be thinking, okay, so what? So you've done this compare and contrast, so what? So what have you found? And that's what that last section would be, a short summary. Yep?
Can I just clarify how that then relates to the major conclusion section?
Yes. Okay, so they all map back in. So the idea would be then that you'd have a section here which would be so what. And you obviously don't call it that. But there's the sort of summary there, right? Summary of that section. And then your conclusions are all those brought together. So the conclusions is a gathering of all the issues. They're all pulled together, not just sort of pasted in, but they are okay. So these are the issues we've developed or found, and now you're wrapping them, trying to tie them together, because inevitably there is going to be a tying of them together, and that's what your conclusions are. And then your recommendations will be based on what your conclusions are, to try to fix it.
So basically, like as you're saying, like at the end of each major section,
yes,
we can make some conclusions or recommendation at the bottom.
Not necessarily. Look, I wouldn't go as far as recommendations. You got a word count here as well, remember? But draw together some sort of summary, and you can hint at a recommendation if you like. Your recommendation is going to come from the literature that you've been talking about. I mean, it's going to be pointless that your recommendation is going to come from somewhere else, because you've already been talking about what's best practice in the stuff above, haven't you? So you've talked about what's best practice in risk analysis, and you've got a citation there in that text. So whatever your recommendation is going to be later on, it's going to tie back to that. I can't imagine you citing somebody else then. You should have been talking about them up there. Yeah? So each section is broken down, and that's what we sort of, we don't give marks for that, but we remove marks if people don't use subsections, because it's a sensible way of breaking it down into pieces that you can then use as a map to refer back to. Is that okay? References, remember, aren't in the numbered section. So references is a piece of back, so it doesn't have a number. Okay. Again, it's just a standard way of doing these things. And then there's the appendices, and then the figures. So you've got a list of figures and a list of tables that are used. And again, if you're labeling the tables and the figures properly, this little function within Microsoft Word will create the table for you. Okay, so you don't have to go in and do all those little dots. Right? Don't do that. Because as soon as somebody else opens it on their machine and they have different setups, all your numbers go all over the place.
And we need to have a table of list of figures and list of tables both on separate pages.
I mean, it could be.
Excuse me, John. So
Yes.
across the top of every page you need the title in the header, do you?
Well, I mean, you know, this, it doesn't have to be. But if you were keeping track of a document, you'd have to have some sort of marking somewhere that pertains that this page is contained to some particular document. So you'd even put something in the footer. This person's trying to put a header there, but you don't have to. I mean, I'm going for the, you know, the basic structure here is that you need a table of contents. The table of contents needs to show the sections. Numbering here. A standard format is that the report begins on page 1. So the introduction is page 1. Everything that is before that is in Roman numerals. Okay? And that's just a standard convention that's used. Most books will have that. Okay, so any questions on the table of contents? So the introduction then. So you've got to remember now that you've got the executive summary. And there's going to be parts in the executive summary that are regurgitated in the introduction. But the introduction is a bit more than that. So what you're doing now is, the reader's now committed, the reader is now reading your document. So you're now about to tell them what's in the document, a little bit fuller, and you're also about to tell them what was done. So again, there's a sort of a typical length of an introduction, a couple of pages perhaps, or a page and a half. So again, this is what the project's about. This is why the project was done. This is why the comparison was done. Some of the findings may have been a bit more wordy here than sort of bullet points. Then nice little piece here about this little paragraph is about how it was done. So how was this done? What did you do? This person went and compared, used various journals, databases. The journals that were used weren't particularly from project management. They crossed other boundaries as well. So if you were going to critique this report, one of the things you would do is you would say, how can I look at this report and find out where they got their information from? Well, one of the things you could do is look straight at the references. You can have a look at the journals there. But also, there's a sort of a statement at the front here basically saying, look, he looked at integration management, he looked at information systems, he looked on various reports, and it referred to documents that were in the organization. So instead of somebody going, so where do you get the data from? Do you get it from actual documents in the business, in the company? Or are you getting it from just interviewing people? Or is it just your own opinion? Where is this information coming from? Yes? And again, so there's the introduction. Any questions on that? Wow, brilliant. Background. Again, it doesn't have to be much. You know, why does the project exist? So, what's the point of the project? So set the scene of the project. Where does it come from? Why is it there? People sort of say, well, can I just cut and paste the project background from one assignment to the next? Well, actually, you know, if you unfold the project with the background, you'll see that if you looked at the project from an HR point of view, sort of different language comes through, or if it's from a scope and financial point of view, again, different language comes through. So it's probably mostly the same. But I would say that, you know, you could be a bit more discerning and perhaps instead of just cut and paste it, just think, how can I flavour the background here with what this project, with what this critical analysis is about? See, ideally, if you took your ultimate report would be all the assignments from all the project management courses put together. And that would be a comprehensive critical analysis of all the aspects covered in project management. Okay? Because it would cover HR, risk, quality, all sorts, all in one document. So again, there's the typical size of a background. So, let me have a look at a couple of things. Text, the actual words that you're using here. So I'm going to look at how to cite others correctly. So let me give you a bad one. So think about this. Project work was scheduled in the brief to be completed by September. This enabled the project owners to map the time phase, resources, budgets, where blah 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 blah. It talks about the project, and then it says Gardner, page 22, 2005. Now, when you look at that, you might think, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But Gardner, I know, had nothing what to say about that project. And that's what that presupposes. So it presupposes that Gardner had something to say about this. Also, we've got terms like Gardner, Gardner who, they've just sort of left it there. And then they've classically dumped a reference at the end of a paragraph. I see that a lot. Right? Paragraph of words, somebody just dumps a reference in it. Another paragraph, and you know that what was said there has nothing to do with what that author wrote. I know what this person is saying. What this person is saying is, something happened here in the project. And Gardner has also spoken about this. And it aligns with what Gardner's have to say. But that's not what that says. What this says is, Gardner said this, and he didn't. Okay? So, some things to look at here then. So again, in the first piece here, quality planning, fundamental steps, management, and there's some sort of citation or something. So what you're sort of saying is these people, if you look at their paper, generally were saying this. But if you want to be specific, then we're on to something with some quotes. So now we're quoting somebody. Okay? So according to these people, I know you use quotes. And now it's again convention to put the page number in where that quote comes from, as opposed to just the book or just the paper, where the sense of what you've said, you've summed up an idea, but you couldn't put a page on it. Does everybody get that? Again, another example there. So this is one. So this one's been unpacked a little bit. So here's a nice part to this. So what a nice piece about this is saying, okay, the literature says this, and I can unpack that a little bit as to what it means in the context of this project. And now in this project, this is what we did. See, there's the comparison with one paragraph. There's what the literature said. Then it obviously goes on further down here. But they've cited the literature. This is how the literature is. If I'm to put that in sort of friendlier terms in the context of my project, this is what it means. And now this is what we did in the project. So I've got a couple of things I can get from this as somebody who's looking at it in order to get an insight of what your knowledge is. One, I can see that you understand what the literature is all about, because you've contextualized it there. Two, I can see you can do the critical analysis because you're going on to do some comparison now, to talk about your project. Okay? Any questions? I think this one is. So, again, so what you do here is come to the end of each section and then just sort of say, oh, this is a so what statement. This is so what. I've done this comparison, so what. And again, if you're using the sections, you've got a number to come back to. So in your conclusions, when you're talking about this later, you can refer back to it. So, how are we doing so far before I go on to the figures and tables? Okay? No questions? Lots of people looking like this at me. Is that good or not? Alright. So figures and tables. So there's a couple of things to do here. There's different ways to... At the end of the day, these figures should be used as part of the critical analysis. They have no place in being in this document unless they are helping with the compare and contrast. Okay? So typically the ones that I sort of sigh over would be the ones where somebody's done a cut and paste from the PMBOK guide. They've gone into the PMBOK guide and they've taken that big table that covers the whole thing and they've pasted it in there. Right?
The ones where they do the process.
That's right. Now, put one of those in. But if you're going to put one of those in, delete the contents of those boxes and superimpose your project into them. Okay? Or add text to those boxes, which is perhaps different colour, to sort of say, well, these are the areas these are the stages that the PMI, the PMBOK guide sort of says we should be going through. Now, if you map this project on top of that, this is what you get. See, all of a sudden you've used that diagram to do the comparison. And again, it's the classic sort of that picture. You can really sum up something really quick, and that would take you tons of text to do. But you can do it in an image. So, a couple of ways then to do this. So in this one, this person has taken something from the standards. So they're working in an environment where they have to apply these standards. So this is something that's taken from the set of standards they apply to. And they've obviously customized it in some sort of way, and this is coming from their document. And then later on, underneath here, there's a discussion which goes on about this figure, how they're different. Okay, or what's been missed out. What is there that we should be doing that we're not doing? And our diagram misses out. Okay. So again, another common mistake is, on the list of common mistakes and watch-outs for, people will put a great figure in and never again talk about it. So I'll go in and I'll look, I think that's a great figure, figure 3.1. Control F, figure 3.1. Go bang, straight to there, and then I'll never see it again.
Excuse me, John, with your risk matrix there, normally they have a dot in there, don't they, to actually mark where it sits?
Oh, they do. Oh no, this is a profile, I think, for, he goes on to talk about where his project is mapped in the middle of this. Perhaps they don't use it. I can't remember the discussion that goes on. But can you see how this has taken place as a compare and contrast? So that may be a problem. It's not highlighted there. But at least you're introducing the reader to a concept here, a comparison, and now you can unpack it and talk about it. Another one. So this one here doesn't actually appear. I put this one in here as a reference. This one doesn't actually appear as in the assignment. But this is what appears in the assignment. So that's what you get in the assignment. And it's figure 2, blah, blah, blah. And it's an adapted version of Clayland's. There's Clayland's staying over there. That's what you'd find in his book. Now this person has taken that one and superimposed their project on it. Okay? So you don't need to make the stuff up. In fact, I don't want you to make this stuff up. Remember, the point of these things is that you no longer make stuff up as a project manager. You go off and have a look. Because these people have thought, I mean, you might disagree with it at some point, but they've thought hard about what goes on here, and it might not be a particularly good diagram, but somebody's had a bash at it, right? And it's been out there, knocked around for a few years with a few other academics and practitioners and so on. So why reinvent the wheel? So take a diagram that's used in the literature, and again, that's what you get out of our books. So out of the study guides that we've got, and the study materials, you'd find this stuff in the study materials. There's the diagram there. So when you're looking through and you get to page 24 and it's talking about how a particular diagram that somebody used to define scope, and think to yourself, right, I'm going to use that diagram, and I'm going to superimpose my project on it. Or I'm going to take this table, see tables in a minute, and I'm going to superimpose my project on it. So, if I saw just that diagram there, from an academic point, I see there's no merit in that at all. Why are you showing me a picture out of something in a book? All it proves is that you could do is do cut and paste. Right? But this shows that you understand it, you can interpret it, and you can apply it. And that is a postgraduate skill. Okay, so any questions on figures? Oh, there's another one. So this is again Gardner's thing. So Gardner's got a classic sort of diagram of the phases of the project as they unfold over time. And they've taken their project and they've superimposed it on Gardner's model, and now they can unpack it and talk about it. Okay, tables. So again, tables sort of appear in lots of different ways, shapes and forms, but basically at the end of the day they are used to compare and contrast. So, I look at a table. My first gut reaction is I look at somebody's assignment and I look at a table. Before I look at any part of that table, I am looking for your project in it. I think this person's done a great copy of a table out of the Pinbot guide or something, but where's their project in that table? It's a great opportunity to compare. So, use of tables. So there we are. So this one here. So this one's used, this is to do with quality management concepts. They've broken this one down. They said, look, Kersner's says that you should break it down into these phases. If you break our stuff down, it sort of breaks down into these phases, and this is sort of how you would map them across. See, but I can see the literature in the table, and I can see your project in the table. There they are. There's the critical analysis. It's the start of it. Then there's a piece underneath which explains what this table is about. Okay, so if you do this mapping, this is what you get. This is what you see. Yeah? Same sort of thing. Another one, quality management. There's the other map across to it. Now, a couple of things to note here. I can see where these, as a reader, I can see where these come from. They come from there. This column is cited. So it's not just John's idea what the need for quality management is, because if you don't put that citation there, that's what I have to suppose. So you need, where is this coming from? It's coming from there. Importantly then, when you put the XYZ project, your project in here, if you've got source data, where's it coming from? This is where it's coming from. These are the documents that we went and had a look at and pulled this out of. Okay? Remember, this is an experiment. The strength of this argument is the fact that if anybody wants to criticize this, I would challenge them to go out and do the same thing, and I bet they would come up with the same results as me. But in order for you to challenge them to do the same thing, you have to give them enough information to be able to reproduce it. So, if you were to give somebody an opportunity to reproduce this diagram, you'd need to give them a couple of things, and that is, well, where's the source for the literature coming from? And where did you get it? Did you make this up? Or did it come from documents? No, well, I went and trawled through a few documents. We got some risk policies, and I dug into those. And if you do the same, you'll find the same. There's a whole section of this missing. You see, it's no longer about you anymore. It's about stacking the reality of the project up to what could be considered to be best practice. It takes the personal aspect out of this. No longer John's opinion. Is there another one? So again, first thing I look for, and now, so these are, again, it shows you the source. Right? So the whole thing's been adapted from here, from these various people, and of course, there was a start place which was to do with the project. I put these in here. And I map them, and you can see, oh, it's pretty obvious. Oh, again, you do the so what test. So what? Well, here we are. We didn't do this, and we didn't do that. Well, that might be pretty significant. So now there's something to talk about here. It's an issue, and you can make a recommendation. Yep. Compare, contrast, drag out the issue, make a recommendation. It's the same machine over and over and over. Another one there. This one's to do with scope planning versus and definition. I left the name of the project on that one.
Can you speak that out for us?
But again, there's the project on the bottom there. Right, so this is what these people said, these people said, these people said. There's a whole pile of literature in here. Now, one of the things I can see as somebody who's marking this is that they've gone along and had a look at this. I'm not aware that there's a table that exists that does all this in the literature. It's actually quite a good summary. So they've actually done a good summary here. So they obviously understand in order to be able to compare and contrast these things. So they know the literature. They know what they're talking about. And then they've gone and added their project into the bottom. Now that's a really good table. Right? And again, the strength of the table is not just the table, but it's the discussion that comes now. So what? So we've created this table, so what? Okay, any questions on tables?
Well, maybe how many of these literature lines would you like to say? Is one
these?
too little? Is 5 too much? Or waste of time?
Well, one's a good start.
Yeah.
And, 2 or 3.
It's enough.
So yeah, I mean, you've looked at a couple of pieces of literature. Often you'll find that those literatures will cross anyway. Because if you went to look at those papers, you'd find that one was older than the other one, and they were probably citing each other, so one may be a development of the next one. So as long as there's a couple there, perhaps a couple too.
But it doesn't increase
But, no, I mean,
if it's 3 or 5.
but overall, overall I can see that the person who's created this one has been able to look at Kersner's thing, conceptualize that, and look at the documentation for their project and conceptualize that and try and map them together. Now it's probably not worth them going across other authors, because you might find that this character's had the most to say about these, and they all end up looking pretty much the same. So you've got to, there's a strong paper there, which is Kersner's that book, which is a sort of amalgamation of papers that would be put together. So if I was sort of awarding marks for things, I'd be impressed with that. But I'm also impressed with that. Right, so we're in the HD. We're up there. We're in the high distinction zone. Wherever you are in there is not particularly important. Can you see that's what makes it? That what makes it the difference? You've got to remember that we're not. You can look at assignments as I got 2 marks for this, 4 marks for that, 6 marks for this, and so forth. But you can't really apply that marking to these assignments. You have to do a weighing. You have to weigh them. Right? You have to weigh them. You have to look at them. You have to think to yourself, right? Is this a strong critical analysis? Because if this is a strong critical analysis here, this is an HD. Now it's a matter of determining where from 85 up is it. But it's up there. Whereas if I look at another one, I think to myself, well, there's actually no comparison going on here at all. The person obviously understands the literature because I can see that they're writing about it, but there's no critical analysis. So that's more like a pass. I can see you know the stuff because I can see that you're obviously interpret, writing it in your own words. But that's all that's worth, that's a pass. If you've now started to get some sort of hints, there's a critical analysis going on, but you're really not closing the deal. You might be putting up a few comparisons, but you're not coming with the so what sort of statement. You're not drawing it all together. You're not drawing the issues out. So I can see you've got an idea, you've got a hint of a critical analysis. You just need more work on that. Then that's a credit. If you're doing this much more consistently, so you've got a critical analysis going. I can see the compare and contrast, but perhaps again it's not strong, so it's not. You might be pulling on literature which is the standard textbook, but whereas this one has gone off and looked at a couple of papers and so forth. So now you're in. You've got to remember that the distinction bar is just got two zones to it, a distinction and a high distinction. So you're up there already. Then I would do the measure as, is this a high distinction? Probably not. Yeah? So it's a weighing thing, it's like counting numbers. So if you look at the marking criteria, you can have dots jumping all over the place. But at the end of the day, if you were to put that in somebody's hand and say, right, is this a strong critical analysis? Do we think that this person, A, understands the literature, can compare and contrast between practice, then that's interesting. Did that answer your question? Positive. References. They just need to be easy to follow. So, so we have gone for, a lot of the literature now is, in management particularly, is using the Harvard style, so you use author and date. So as you go through the text, you read the author's name. And you can imagine why management academics like this, right? Because the name keeps cropping up all the time. I was disappointed. The International Journal of Project Management, if you look at some of their older papers, they use the number system. So you read something and there's just a number at the end of it. And then you go to the end of the paper and you'll see them all listed out in number. Now I like that. I like it because I haven't got to trip over people's names all the time as I'm reading. But also I like it because when you look at the set of references, you can see the story evolve in the references. When you read through the list of references, it's like you can see the path that they've progressed along in order to get to the end of the piece that they've done. Whereas in this, you can't. It's just all alphabetical. So, and they've changed, and they've gone to this now. But also, you can expect, what would I be expecting to see here? Not only are the referencing is right, but I would be expecting to see that some of the references in here are from the project. They're from documents from the project. They're in there. Okay? Again, because it shows the strength of your critique. If you were to show somebody in the executive that you've done this analysis, one of the things that I'm sure they'd be interested in knowing is, have you actually gone and looked at our documentation? Because this doesn't show that you have. But when I look at the list of references, I can see that there's material coming from. Also, when I'm looking here, I can see that there's papers here. They're all to do with, they're in journals, or they're in books. If there's Wikipedia popping up, if there's Joe Blogg's website, no. Again, because it all goes to opinion. And then their opinion is no different than your opinion. It carries no different weight.
What about the age of the reference? Currency?
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, some, I suppose, I wouldn't necessarily be looking through for everything being fairly present, because there's some stuff that's been around for a while and it's still valid, and the stuff that was done in the 80s is still sound now. But I suppose if you looked at it and you saw everything in the 80s, then perhaps you wouldn't be so impressed. So yeah, so you're looking for some sort of, there's some freshness in there, but also I wouldn't be particularly looking for that everything is. Anything on referencing? The interesting thing is that I'm standing here telling this to you, and I'm the laziest one of all with referencing. One of the advantages of publishing stuff in a journal is that they've got a whole team of people who fix this stuff up. Right? So I'm quite sloppy with my referencing, and I just sort of submit it, and then when I look at my journal piece when it comes out, I think, wow, look at all those references in the back. Don't they look all they get all the important pieces? And of course I never did that. Okay. And of course you must be using EndNote. You must be using EndNote. Okay, so if you don't know what EndNote is,
I can never get it to work.
So, right, well, okay, so as far as that's concerned, you know, we've got Kerry downstairs in the library here, who is always welcome to take questions, particularly from the project management course, because we're always pestering Kerry, so she's very good. But she's sort of come to learn a lot about project management discipline now in the journals and so forth, so she's pretty tip-top with all that sort of stuff. So it's worth, even while you're here, go and talk to her if you've got issues with EndNote. But you must be using EndNote. No longer are we in the days where you're moving stuff around manually and typing all this stuff out, okay? Don't do it. Okay, so conclusions. So again, so this is where we sort of drag all the stuff and pull it all together. So, you know, people say, should I put them in numbers? I don't see why not. So you can have, you could probably have a bit more than this, and you could sort of have a bit of a preamble that draws them together. And then, okay, so here's the issues, going through the exercise that we've pulled out. Okay? So it's a drawing together of all those sub-paragraphs, if you like, and trying to wrap them all up. And then the recommendations are then they tie to the conclusions. Okay? So again, you pull them all in. Another thing I'd like to see sometimes is, not all the time, not all, but obviously there's some sort of reference in here as well. Okay, because this is making a recommendation to use an appropriate legal framework, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, well, where the hell does all that come from again? Oh. So you could refer people back to the section in your assignment, or you could refer them straight to that source document. That's, again, the power of having all the sections numbered. Okay, so you can take, because this is the sort of money shot here of the whole exercise, right? You've handed over money for this. You commissioned somebody to go and do an analysis of the project management procedures, and that's what you're paying for, because that's going to try and fix this up. So to just look at it as a whole piece, you know, you've got the compare and contrast. It happens in the text. It happens in the figures. It happens in the tables. Constant compare and contrast. Draw out the issues, sum them up. Where do you begin writing this? Well, you begin writing it down here. This is where you open the document up, and you can put all your headers in if you like, but you start typing here, and then you work backwards. And if you've set up your tables, the tables for the figures and tables and so on, as you go through, it will start adding these and building them for you. You don't have to put those in yourself. It'll do all this for you. And the last thing then that you write is the introduction and the executive summary. Yeah. So the executive summary should be the last thing. So how does that sound? Is that okay? That's my sort of exemplar. I mean, that's just trying to get over some of the concepts, perhaps what they look like, to give you a feel for what it looks like, but also some of the key components that I would see, the high distinction.